Hey, Kurt Mortensen here to talk about Maximize Your Influence. Just finished up the podcast, of course, the Maximize Your Influence podcast. The link is below. Hit subscribe, hit the like, help me out here. And of course, on this video, I want to spend a little more time to kind of supersize some of the things I talked about on the podcast. Now, this week I talked about that initial encounter when you're trying to persuade and influence somebody, that first initial few seconds and how critical it is because the cement dries fast. And sometimes we need to connect, sometimes we need a little credibility, and how do you know when to do each one of those? And that's what I focus on the podcast. Now in this video, again, let's supersize one of these, and again, we can't say that because the whole McDonald's things, but I'm going to say let's supersize it. What do we do when we need to connect? What is that lost people skill? What is that one thing that you can learn to do that makes the biggest difference? And hold on, you've heard this before, but most of you aren't doing it, is remembering names. Now this has a high lactose, or as we say here, cheesy thing when you get the telemarketer to call you like, oh, hey Frank, hey Frank, hey Frank, and they use it way too much. But let's back up and look at the science. Remember, this is all about the science. When people were doing MRIs on the brain and you mentioned their name, it actually triggered a pleasure center in their brain and they liked you more. It grabbed their attention and it works. It's critical to your aspect. But then part of your brain, you always tell yourself, oh, I'm not good at remembering names. Now, if you studied with me on mindset and millionaire psychology, you know that thoughts control emotions and emotions control actions. If you tell yourself you're not good at remembering names, ding, ding, and that's what you get. You've got to change your mindset because it's not a function of memory. It's a function of listening. If I gave you $1,000 to remember 20 people's names in the room, I'm pretty sure you could do it. So let me give you a few tools to help you out to remember names because it's such a simple way to get people to like you. Number one, choose to care. Choose to commit to do this. You can do this. Psychology tells us that our brain's everywhere. We don't care. We're trying to say what to say next. Choose to care, to understand that if you can do this, a simple thing, they're easier to persuade. So that's the first one. Just choose to care. Choose to commit yourself to be good at remembering names. So tell your brain, hey, I can do this. I'm good at remembering names. Number two, repeat it or write it down. Okay, if you're face-to-face with a person in the first 30 seconds, try to repeat their name in a sentence. If you're over the phone, just write it down. That physical thing, just to see it, to write it down, that function, there's just something there that helps you remember the name. So repeat it or write it down or do both if you can. Number three, spell it out. Most of us are visual people. And it becomes 25 times easier to remember when it's visual. When you've written it out, you can visualize it in your brain, spell it out, whatever you need to do, look at their business card. It just becomes easier to remember. It becomes locked in your mind and you become better at remembering names. Number four, make connections or associations. I know this seems silly, but it works so well in your brain. Frank, oh, that's the name of my dad. Sally from sales. Or I heard Danita, just like fajita. Those type of things. Hank, looks like your face was hit with a plank. Now, I know that's rude and inconsiderate. You never say to them face to face, but that little silly thing can make it much easier for you to remember their names. Do this. It's a simple thing. People skills. People like you more, and it makes a huge difference. Thanks for listening. Hit subscribe. Listen to the podcast at MaximizeYourInfluence.com. Master the simple people skill. People will like you more. It's easier to persuade, and you can persuade with power.